Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sociology of Aging. This week, we are beginning with a pretty big question. What does it mean to age? At first, that question might seem easy to answer. We might say that aging is simply what happens as our bodies get older. We are born, we grow, we mature, we get older, and eventually we die. Biologically, that is certainly part of the story. But sociology asks us to look beyond the biological process and ask another question. What does aging mean to us as members of society? Our ideas about what it means to be young, middle aged, or old are not created by biology alone. They are also shaped by culture, history, institutions, families, healthcare systems, workplaces, government policies, media, and our relationships with other people. That is the foundation of the sociology of aging. Jason Powell begins our textbook by challenging one of the most common ways of thinking about aging. In Western societies, aging has often been understood primarily through a biomedical model. From this perspective, aging is frequently associated with physical and psychological decline. Growing older becomes almost synonymous with losing abilities, becoming less healthy, becoming dependent on others, and eventually approaching death. Powell argues that this way of thinking is too narrow because it treats aging as though it is primarily something that happens inside the body. Sociologists do not deny that bodies change as we age. Instead, sociology asks us to consider everything surrounding those biological changes. For example, consider the idea of retirement. There is nothing in human biology that tells us that someone should stop working at a particular age. The meaning of retirement is something societies have created. The same is true of many of the expectations we associate with age. We have ideas about what people should accomplish when they are young. We have expectations about when people should work, have families, become parents, or become grandparents. We have expectations about when someone is considered middle aged, and we have expectations about what older people should or should not do. Those expectations are social. This is where the concept of social construction becomes important. When sociologists say that something is socially constructed, we are not saying that it is imaginary. We are saying that the meaning we attach to something is created through social interaction, culture, institutions, and history. Aging is a great example. The number of years a person has lived is measurable, but what those years mean is much more complicated. Think about the number 65. Why does that number matter? In many societies, 65 has historically been associated with retirement and older adulthood. But there is nothing magical about the number 65 itself. A person does not suddenly become fundamentally different at midnight on their 65th birthday. The meaning attached to that age comes from social institutions and cultural expectations. This is one of the central ideas I want you to take away from this course. Aging is biological, but the experience and meaning of aging are also social. Powell argues that sociology can help us recognize assumptions about aging that have become so familiar that they appear natural. Once something becomes part of everyday common sense, we often stop questioning it. Sociology asks us to question it. This brings us to one of the most important concepts in sociology, the sociological imagination. C. Wright Mills described the sociological imagination as the ability to connect our personal experiences to larger social structures and historical circumstances. Powell applies this idea directly to aging. Think about something like loneliness in later life. We might look at an older person who is lonely and assume that loneliness is simply an individual problem. Maybe we think the person does not have enough friends. Maybe we think their family does not visit often enough. Maybe we think they simply need to be more socially active. But sociology asks us to take a step back. What is happening in that person's community? Do they have transportation? Can they afford to participate in social activities? Do they live somewhere where they can easily interact with other people? Have their friends or partners died? Have they experienced discrimination? Did they spend their working years in ways that shape their social networks? Are there social policies or economic conditions affecting their ability to participate in community life? Suddenly, something that looked like an individual problem becomes connected to larger social forces. That is the sociological imagination. It allows us to connect biography, history, and social structure. This is going to be one of the most important tools we use throughout this course. Powell defines the sociology of aging as a way of examining the assumptions society makes about aging and the relationships between individuals and social institutions. In other words, sociologists are interested in both sides of the relationship. How does society shape people's experiences of aging, and how do older adults themselves participate in shaping society? The second question is important. Older adults are not simply passive recipients of social forces. They have identities, they make choices, they have relationships. They participate in families, communities, workplaces, politics, and culture. They resist stereotypes. They create meaning in their own lives. So, one of the things we will continually question in this course is the tendency to treat older adults as one homogeneous group. There is no single experience of being old. People age differently, and those differences are sociologically important. Our second reading this week, Global Health and Aging, takes the conversation from the individual level to the global level. The report begins with a remarkable demographic transformation. The world is getting older. In 2010, there were an estimated 524 million people aged 65 and older. The report projected that this number would nearly triple by 2050, reaching approximately 1.5 billion older adults. And this change is not happening only in wealthy countries. In fact, some of the fastest population aging is occurring in less developed countries. The report explains that two major forces are driving population aging. The first is declining fertility. When families have fewer children, younger age groups make up a smaller proportion of the population. The second is increasing longevity. People are living longer. When fewer children are being born and people are living longer, older adults make up a larger proportion of the population. This is not simply a demographic statistic, it changes the structure of society. The Global Health and Aging Report raises another important question. If people are living longer, are they also living healthier? That is not necessarily the same thing. The report discusses an ongoing debate about what happens to health and disability as life expectancy increases. One possibility is called compression of morbidity. This is the idea that people might live longer while spending a smaller proportion of their lives experiencing serious disability. Another possibility is expansion of morbidity. And this would mean that people live longer, but also spend more years experiencing chronic disease or disability. There are also possibilities somewhere between those two. The important point for sociology is that these outcomes are not simply biological inevitabilities. They are also connected to social conditions. Healthcare matters, income matters, housing matters, transportation matters, family relationships matter, public policy matters, the physical environment matters, and access to resources matters. The global report, therefore, asks us to think about something larger than simply how many older adults there will be. We need to ask what kind of societies we are creating for those people. If people are living longer, do communities have appropriate housing? Do healthcare systems have the capacity to meet changing needs? Do families have access to support? Can people remain socially connected? Can people continue working if they want to? Can they retire if they need to? Can communities support people with disabilities? Do governments have policies that allow people to live healthy and meaningful lives as they age? The report emphasizes the importance of research, data systems, infrastructure, and evidence based policy because population aging is a major social transformation. This is where our two readings come together beautifully. Powell asks us to question the assumptions we make about individual aging. The Global Health and Aging Report asks us to consider what happens when aging occurs on a massive demographic scale. Together, they remind us that aging is simultaneously personal and social. There is one more idea I want you to carry with you this week. There is no universal experience of aging. A person who grows old in the United States may have a very different experience from someone who grows old in Japan, Brazil, Nigeria, Italy, or another part of the world. And even within the United States, two people who are the same age can have dramatically different experiences. Their experiences may differ because of income, race, gender, sexuality, education, health, family relationships, occupation, neighborhood, access to healthcare, and the historical period in which they lived their lives. This is why sociology is so important to the study of aging. If we only look at the body, we miss the society. If we only look at the individual, we miss the institutions and structures surrounding that individual. And if we treat older adults as one homogeneous group, we miss the enormous diversity of human experiences. So let's return to our original question. What does it mean to age? Biologically, aging involves changes to our bodies over time. But sociologically, aging is also an experience that is interpreted and organized by society. We create categories of age. We create expectations about what people should do at different ages. We create institutions such as retirement systems and healthcare systems. We create cultural ideas about what older people should look like and how they should behave, and we create policies that influence the resources available to people as they grow older. At the same time, older adults are not simply shaped by society, they participate in society. They create relationships, identities, communities, and meanings. That is why sociology gives us a different way of understanding aging. Instead of asking only, what happens to the body as we grow older, we can also ask, what happens to people as they move through changing social worlds? And perhaps most importantly, we can ask, who gets to define what aging means? That question will follow us throughout this entire course. As you move through the readings and activities this week, I want you to begin noticing your own assumptions about aging. Where did those assumptions come from? Were they created by your family, your culture, media, healthcare, work, religion, government, or your own experiences? And how might those assumptions change if you looked at aging through the sociological imagination? That is where we begin. Welcome to Sociology of Aging.